In the remote outskirts of the city, hidden behind overgrown trees and a crumbling fence, stood an abandoned asylum known as Hollow Creek. Once a place of hope for the mentally ill, it had long since been forgotten. Left to decay after a mysterious fire claimed the lives of many patients and staff decades ago. The stories about the asylum varied. Some said the fire was an accident, while others whispered about dark experiments and unspeakable horrors within its walls. The local authorities had long sealed the place, warning curious onlookers to stay away. But for a group of urban explorers, Emma, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, Hollow Creek was the ultimate destination. They had heard the rumors of the tormented spirits that still lingered there, and they wanted to capture something extraordinary for their growing YouTube channel. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and recording equipment, the group set out one evening, their excitement mingling with an underlying sense of dread. As they approached the asylum, the air grew colder, and the once distant hum of insects fell silent. The building loomed before them like a dark, hulking beast, its broken windows staring back like hollow eyes. "Ready?" Jake asked, his voice wavering slightly. "Let's do this," Emma replied, masking her own nerves with a determined nod. The group pried open a rusted door and stepped inside. The interior was a haunting snapshot of a bygone era. Peeling wallpaper, rusted bed frames, and scattered medical equipment hinted at the asylum's grim past. The smell of mildew and decay filled their nostrils, and the faint echoes of their footsteps reverberated through the empty corridors. They began their exploration, filming every corner, every creak of the building. The further they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The asylum seemed to swallow their light, the darkness pressing in from all sides. As they entered the main ward, Sarah paused. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others stopped, straining to listen. A faint, distant sound reached their ears, like the soft murmur of voices just on the edge of perception. "Probably just the wind," Tom suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. They continued deeper into the asylum, each of them feeling an increasing sense of unease. The building seemed to shift and groan as if it were alive, and the temperature dropped the further they went. They reached the basement, the supposed epicenter of the asylum's haunted reputation. It was here that the most dangerous patients were kept in solitary confinement, away from the rest. The door to the basement was ajar, creaking ominously as they pushed it open. The air was thick with a malevolent energy, almost suffocating. Their flashlights flickered as they descended the stairs, casting eerie shadows on the damp walls. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and small, windowless rooms, each one filled with an overwhelming sense of despair. "There's something wrong down here," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it." As they explored the basement, the voices they had heard earlier grew louder, more distinct. The sound of weeping, pleading, and angry whispers surrounded them, yet there was no one there. Jake pointed his camera down one of the long corridors. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, zooming in. In the distance, just beyond the reach of their flashlights, a shadowy figure stood motionless. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and shrouded in darkness. The figure seemed to watch them, its presence exuding an aura of pure hatred. "Is that a person?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, the figure began to move toward them, its form flickering like a glitching image. Panic set in and they all backed away, but the figure kept coming, its movement increasingly erratic. "Run!" Tom shouted, and they bolted down the corridor, the figure pursuing them. They stumbled into a large room at the end of the corridor and slammed the door shut behind them. Breathing heavily, they held the door closed, waiting for the figure to reach them. But the hallway outside had fallen silent. "What the hell was that?" Jake asked, his hands shaking. "It wasn't human," Emma said, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, the door behind them, leading to another part of the basement, burst open. More shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their forms twisted and grotesque. They moved with unnatural speed, their faces contorted in agony and rage. The group was surrounded. The air was filled with the sound of their tormented cries, each one a soul trapped in the asylum, seeking escape, but unable to find peace. Desperation took hold as they realized there was no way out. The spirits closed in, their hands reaching out cold and skeletal. In a last-ditch effort, Jake pulled out the one thing he had hoped they wouldn't need. A vial of holy water he had brought just in case. He splashed the water in front of them, and the spirits recoiled, their forms dissipating into the air with anguished screams. The group took this moment to flee, racing back through the basement, up the stairs and toward the exit. The asylum seemed to fight against their escape, doors slamming shut, corridors stretching endlessly. But with sheer willpower, they finally burst through the entrance, into the cold night air. They didn't stop running until they reached their car, panting and shaking from the ordeal. As they drove away, the asylum loomed behind them, its dark silhouette a reminder of the horrors within. Back home, the group reviewed the footage they had captured. The video was filled with strange distortions, flickering lights and eerie sounds. But what struck them the most was a final image. Just as they had escaped, the camera caught a glimpse of the asylum's windows. In each window stood a shadowy figure, watching them leave. Though they had escaped Hollow Creek, the spirits they had encountered were not so easily forgotten. Their dreams were plagued by nightmares, and in the quiet of the night, they could still hear the whispers, calling them back to the asylum. And they knew deep down that the spirits of Hollow Creek would never rest until someone freed them from their eternal confinement. The asylum remained, waiting for its next visitors, the whispers in the dark growing louder, more insistent with each passing day.